Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the Stand With Trans Kids tag. This tag was created by Leo Bancroft, who, if you don't follow, he shouts out a different charity with each of his videos, so you should check him out. I was tagged by Melissa from Fully Booked and Fraser Simons from Springboard Thoughts. I will link to both of them below. I was tagged a couple of months ago, but I am massively behind on tags, more than a couple of months behind, to be honest, but I thought this would be on theme for Pride Month, so I should get it out before the end of the month. The first question here is to tag people, and because I have waited so long to do this, I no longer remember who's done it or not, so if the fancy strikes you, do the tag. Question number 2 is tell us about some books on your TBR pile featuring trans or non-binary characters or nonfiction on that theme. And I don't tend to check out what's happening with characters before I pick up fiction. Characters don't tend to be what drives me to read books. That said, I currently have a couple of books either on the go or out at the library where the authors are either trans or non-binary. So I have the audiobook of Zain Jukadar's Map of Salt and Stars, I think it's called, and they are a transmasculine. And I'm currently reading an e-arc of Alexandra Rowland's Taste of Gold and Iron, which is a kind of pseudo-Ottoman fantasy, except it's not really a fantasy, it's a romance, even though it's published by Tor. Anyway, they're non-binary, so if we can go with the writers rather than the characters, because I don't really pay attention to characters. Question number 3 is recommend a favorite book, show, or movie featuring a trans or non-binary character. One of my favorite poetry collections from a couple of years ago was Kai Cheng Thom's A Place Called No Homeland, which isn't exclusively dealing with trans issues, although the author is a trans woman and it is very personal poetry. A lot of it is dealing more with other elements of identity, although all within intersection of each other. So I will go with that. Question number 4 is everyone has their own journey and no one demographic is a monolith. Recommend a book with a journey, however you define that. I feel like the temptation is there to pick some fantasy novels because they're all about trekking forth somewhere. But instead, I'm going to go with Claude McKay's Romance in Marseille, which is about a character who attempts to go on a journey and stows away on a ship, and he ends up in an ice container and basically ends up with frostbite, so he has his legs amputated, but that ends up with a lawsuit, so he gets money, so he gets to go back to France, because that happened in the US. So it's a journey of life and other wildness. I was going to say it's very modern. It's from the modern period. So it would have fit for May of the Moderns. Like, this is set in the Jazz Age, but it could be set in the current day because things have not changed that much. For better and for worse, but people like to pretend that they have. Anyway, that's not about the journey. The journey is he gets on a boat and then gets on another boat. What am I even talking about? Question number 5 is none of us knows anything, even about our own identities, especially since we're not a monolith and we each have our own journey. What is a book that taught you something either about yourself or the world around you? I like to think that almost every book is teaching me something about, well, humanity, so that's both myself and the world. Especially maybe because I primarily read nonfiction, and when it's fiction, it's autofiction. Every day we should be learning something, so I feel like holding up one book is a lie, because it's all of them. Everything is inviting you into somebody else's head, even if it's fiction, right? So, and then you're finding out not just about the things you didn't know, but the things you did as well, because we all overlap in some ways. Like, I always think it's very artificial when people say, well, I can't relate to this person because we differ in one demographic category, and that's nonsense. Like, everything is in overlap with everything else, and don't try to hide your prejudices behind saying you can't relate to something because one or two demographic categories differ. That is ridiculous. What's next? Question number 6 is, when things are hard in the world or in our lives, sometimes there are things we can do to help center and refocus ourselves, to bring joy, to keep us going, to keep living, resisting, being our authentically amazing selves. What are things you do to find joy? I don't find joy. I'm the most negative person. Or to center yourself. It is walking my dog, especially on paths, or especially if we're hiking or we're on paths that run through nature, because nothing feels like being in the world, like being surrounded by trees and a furry animal. There we go. I always say the one thing that I miss about my time when I lived in Houston was that one of my best friends there, she had her 2 dogs, and I would bring my old dog and we would go hiking basically 4 or 5 mornings a week. And that is the most centering thing, if you can do that. And if that's accessible at any given time, that would be my choice of how to center the self. Question number 7 is, what is your walk-on music or your feel at home in your body music? Question number 8 is, finding mentors, people of wisdom, or heroes can be another way to help us navigate life. Who are some of your mentors? And can you share something that they taught you or inspired you to learn more about? That friend that I mentioned in Houston, we used to see each other at this dog party that we went to, which was an illegal dog park. But anyway, and she had started texting me saying, let's go hiking. And I was really paranoid about snakes because there are venomous snakes there. And she got me over my snake fear. So respect. Cheers, Usha. Thank you. She's not watching this. Many of my friends and relatives know that I do booktube, and they mostly find it boring. Okay, what's next? Question number 9 is, who are some out trans or non-binary booktubers, Instagrammers, authors, actors, etc. who you would like to shout out? And what I'd like to suggest to people is that they challenge their own assumptions when they are watching various people on BookTube, but also when they are reading authors, because I think a lot of the time we default to assuming that people are in default categories, which isn't always true, and we are maybe doing each other a disservice by doing that. And I mean, not everybody puts things like that in their profile, but I think there are a lot of things that one picks up if you listen to people talking, and I think that's worthwhile. So I think it's worth just kind of clocking that sometimes, because not everyone is out and loud and proud, or can be. And I think it might be more respectful of people who can't be, or who choose not to be, if we're a little more careful about assuming what categories people don't belong to in general. But I will mention, for example, I think I've mentioned this before. When I bought the Invisibles omnibus, I happened to Google Grant Morrison for the first time in forever, and I hadn't realized that they were non-binary, but because, you know, when I looked into biographical details back in the 90s, when we were all on Usenet and whatnot, that wouldn't have been part of the discourse. And so I think there are a lot of authors like that that maybe we've been reading for 30 years, and where if you were assuming that you know, maybe you don't know, I guess. But at the same time, don't expect people to tell you, because nobody owes you outness. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Question number 10 is, what are some organizations you'd like to shout out for supporting trans kids / trans folks? All right, I think that's the last question. My computer just went to sleep. So cheers to Melissa and to Fraser for tagging me. Cheers to Leo for creating the tag. And as always, if you are watching this and you would like to be tagged, please consider yourself tagged. And that's it for now. Ciao.